What is going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, here with a new series we're going to be bringing you here on Two Guys Watching Football. It's the Sideline Report, where we're going to be getting some of the best and brightest reporters from around Baltimore that are day in, day out to bring you some insight from the boots on the ground. If this is a series you're excited about, hit that like button, let me know that you're interested, and click subscribe so you can find your way back for more Ravens content. Today, we're starting off with a man that needs no introduction. It's the Athletics' Jeff Zrebiec, who's joining us from enemy territory down in Carolina prior to the joint practices and the game on Saturday. Jay-Z, my man, how is it going?
Good. I'm coming to you live, Cole, from Duncan, South Carolina, which I didn't know existed until about 2 hours ago when I checked in the hotel. And I come to South Carolina and greeted by tornado warnings all afternoon and early evening. So it's been a fun one, but I'm looking forward to practices. You always get you kind of always get a good idea, change of scenery, and, the energy heats up a little bit, ratchets it up a little bit. Some of the practices in Owings Mills, it gets tedious after a while. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these two teams, practice over the next couple of days.
And I'm sure getting back out on the road's got to feel kind of nice, a little bit of normalcy going on there. So that's got to be great too.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it today, and I think the last time I was on a plane was the Combine 2 years ago. Not the 2020 Combine, whatever one was they actually had that wasn't canceled.
Yeah,
so it was weird. Yeah, there's a couple of Ravens folks on my flight. Seems to be a good crowd headed out here to go kind of move the facility to another locale for a couple of days.
And do we have we'll set the over under at 1.5 camp fights at the joint practices. You taking the over, the under on that?
I'm taking the over, and it was kind of funny. It was John Harbaugh brought that up. He's like, John Harbaugh doesn't like the focus on that. You know what I mean? And this all started when they had the practices with the 49ers after the Super Bowl, obviously the Harbaugh brothers, and everyone was predicting, here you have the 49ers. They lost the Super Bowl to the Ravens several months ago, and they're coming in their building where the Ravens have the they're dressing in the indoor facility where the Ravens have their Super Bowl banner up, and like this is going to be like Golden Gloves, we all thought, and there was no fights, really no incidents like that. The only real fight happened a couple of years ago in Indianapolis when they had the joint practices there, and Albert McClellan absolutely pummeled someone. Now, if you follow the Ravens, or if you knew, Albert McClellan was one of those guys who you did not mess with, not a real angry and aggressive guy until you set him off, and then it got ugly quick. And he was on top of the Saints guy in a special teams drill, just landing haymakers. And it was just it was an interesting, it certainly spruced things up. I think Albert McClellan missed a couple of days of practice too because of it. And, after the practice, Frank Reich was all upset, we can't have this happen and all that. And John Harbaugh was like, well, boys will be boys. So,
Reminds me of that 2015 preseason game. It's Steve Smith Sr. getting into it with Culver, I think it was. And
was it Kenny Vaccaro of?
I think so, yeah. And I'm like,
I think it was Kenny
it's
Vaccaro.
Preseason. He's getting ejected. Like, what's going on here?
He watches the game from the suite at M&T Bank Stadium. He's tweeting out pictures. Speaking of, he'll be there. He's supposedly, he does some announcing for the Panthers. I assume he'll be there tomorrow. Let's hope he does some work with those Ravens receivers and some releases and other things. But always an entertaining guy to catch up with as well. Yeah, you never know. You never know how these things will go. But when you combine different teams and teams that practice in different styles, and then you get the heat element, and, I'm sure the Ravens players aren't thrilled to be here all week. People can say what they want, but these guys, players usually pan joint practices. So we'll see what happens. But again, jobs are, this is the biggest week right now for jobs. There's a lot of pressure on certain guys, and that always brings kind of, a little bit of an edge. And, between the joint practices and Saturday's game, and there's another roster cut next Tuesday. So, some guys know they got to pick it up. And then, the 53 man has to be decided like in 2 weeks. That's not a long time. So we're getting low on opportunities here to make an impression to make the team. So, I'd expect there to be a pretty high intensity level on the field.
Absolutely. And we're going to be running through some of that right now. So we're going to do a little bit of catch up here with Jay-Z. We haven't talked since before training camp. We've seen some breakouts. We've seen some disappointments in first few weeks at camp and, of course, the first preseason game. So you know where I'm going to have to start. We're going to have to start with the most important position on the offense. It's the offensive line. And, yeah, there have been concerns. Jay-Z, Jonas Schaefer, the guys that are there every day, they've been talking about it. We got to see our first glimpse of the offensive line on Saturday, and it wasn't great. So let's start there. What are you seeing, and how high is your concern level?
Yeah, I went in, to this game against the Saints with an open mind about what I was going to write, whether I was going to do notes, whether I was going to focus on, the number 2 quarterback battle. And it just became so obvious that was the angle coming out of that game. And, I got a lot of, crap, for lack of a better word, from fans saying it was overly negative and they won their 18th or whatever it was straight preseason game. And, the defense forced all those turnovers. Yeah, I get it, but I don't really think it was an overreaction. Now, I know they didn't have a whole lot of starters in, but it wasn't like an isolated thing to me. Keep in mind, we've been watching them for a couple weeks, and the offensive line struggles were painfully obvious in the practices. So then when they went out in a game and another team and the struggles kind of continued, it just became, the obvious storyline. It's, and for the people that make the argument, well, they're backups, well, they were playing against backups. I didn't see Cameron Jordan on the field in M&T Bank Stadium, so, I didn't expect a tour de force, but I expected functional offensive line play. Bradley Bozeman started a lot of games in the NFL. Pat McCarry has started a lot of games in the NFL. Even Tyree Phillips, would he start 8 games last year? The other Ben Powers has started games in the NFL. They didn't put out a bunch of undrafted free agents. You know what I mean? So I just expected a more functional, solid effort, even if, I didn't think things would be perfect, but I expected better. But that, it was a continuation of what we've been seeing in practice when they've really struggled to pick up blitzes at times, and they've lost a lot of one-on-one matchups on the edge. I do think, there's been some positive developments over the last week. When they went on the practice field on Monday, you saw Ron, and when they started 11-on-11s, you saw Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, Kevin Zeitler at right guard. And that's what it looks like. Those guys being back just makes you feel good, much better about the situation. Bradley Bozeman missed a practice. He was back today at practice. Good sign. He's also going to need to play a whole lot better than we saw the other night. What worries me more than anything, Cole, I think it'll work itself out as Stanley kind of knocks off the rust and Zeitler gets healthier and Villanueva, who, has kind of been a concern, but not at the top of the list at the moment, when he gets even more comfortable at right tackle. And, they're playing such a vanilla style in the preseason by design, and you don't have the quarterback in there. The schemes and Lamar Jackson, I think, help those guys so much. And I think some of those guys will be in better roles, more suited to what kind of the players for. So I don't think I'm ready to panic. But it needs to be a whole lot better. I mean, let's be honest. And none of the left guards really emerging has not been a positive. No swing tackle emerging, not been a positive. Overall Villanueva hasn't, if he hasn't really, for a guy that there's questions about how much he has left, he hasn't really silenced the questions at this point, but I give him a little bit of rope because he's a veteran. He knows what it takes to get ready. So we'll see what happens going forward. Stanley being back is huge for this team. Zeitler being back is huge for this team. And then when, you get the quarterback in there and they start running their offense, I think it'll look a lot better. But if you're not concerned about that, I think you're kidding yourself at this stage. There's there's definitely some issues that still need to work themselves out.
Yeah, and I think they were glaring. Like, I mean, I felt terrible for J.K. Dobbins. I mean, he got 4 attempts with 0 yards, and it wasn't just like it wasn't like a bunch of blown blocks. It was guys that I kept calling it the interior offensive line kept stagnating, where the snap would happen and they just weren't moving guys anywhere. It was you can see it with the line of scrimmage line, like they're behind the line of scrimmage until the end of the play. And so, that's Bozeman not being able to drive as one tech. That's Ben Powers, who doesn't seem to have any sort of anchor in both the run and the pass game. That's Makari, who was getting tossed around like a sack of potatoes when he was in at right guard in the first couple of drives. So, I mean, the issues were painfully obvious. The hope is you get Zeitler back in there at right guard. Maybe that helps out Bozeman a little bit at center. Cleveland maybe pushes, the left guard spot, but at that point, how much can you rely on a third rounder? I did think Tyree Phillips played like it was very bad at left tackle. I mean, in one drive, he allowed 2 sacks and 1 other pressure. He just gives too much runway. He has no plan, it seems, where, he doesn't really seem to, like, he'll turn and open his chest, but then he doesn't try and ride the hip, or, he sits back, but then he just doesn't seem to have a plan for the pass rusher. So, but when he got in at left guard on Saturday, I thought he played a little bit better. Like he was able to drive block a couple guys. He had a stout anger. I actually thought Ben Bredesen played okay again against, that's when we're getting down into the third stringer. So how much weight does that carry? But that starting unit, that's not it. I don't think Ben Powers is the answer. I was tweeting about it earlier today, and then all of Ravens Twitter now sees that Ben Powers' father has everyone blocked, apparently. So that was a good little fun bit. But and
what I was kind of getting at, what worries me, Cole, is there's a good chance this group won't work together at all and get a single in-game rep as a starting offensive line. I mean, Stanley's not playing Saturday night. I think we know that. And I think it's a little early to predict in the Washington game. I'd say it's probably 50-50 at the moment. I could see him getting some reps in that Washington game as long as he keeps making progress in practice. In Cleveland, Harbaugh predicted he could be back for the joint practices. Normally I would say he won't play Saturday, but they clearly want to get him up to speed and get the rookie some reps. So if he gets through the next 2 days of practice, okay, I could see them, sort of giving him the green light a little bit. Bozeman missed 1 day. He probably will be fine to play. Zeitler, if they wanted to, he probably could play this week. He's still not, full go, but he's getting there. And Villanueva is there, but maybe in the Washington game, they get a couple reps together as a unit. But this is the time. This is the week they wanted to have that group settled and working together. And they had pinpointed that. And just like with the receivers, and I'm sure we'll get to it, you can't get these reps back, and everybody and anybody said in that building that it's really important for the offensive line to work together, and they really haven't had a chance to. Does that mean it's the end of the world? No, but not acknowledging that that's been a little bit of a setback and a disappointment, I don't think is right either. I think you got to call it what it is. And there's some time. If they get back and they have 2 weeks of practice together, I'm sure they'll be competent heading into that week 1. But the idea is not to have an average offensive line here. They've talked about it. They want to build a bully. They want to have one of the best offensive lines in football. And, we just haven't seen it on the field.
Absolutely. And let's move right into the wide receiver group. I mean, there's been a lot of talk around it given the injury to Rashad Bateman, which obviously really stinks. But, I tweeted this is the first time, and I think, ever that, it feels like you can kind of lose a guy like Rashad Bateman and you kind of feel okay that they have some depth built there now. Maybe not no one wants to lose their first round wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. But, Proche's been playing well. Wallace is out there. They have Duvernay, who I thought played really well on Saturday. He looks a little bit more crisp in and out of his roots. That was something that stood out. So, how's the wide receiver group looking kind of without Bateman now that he's out?
Yeah, I have a roster next to me, Cole, because it's been so difficult keeping track of the coming and goings. I mean, at today's practice, they had probably 5 of their top 8 receivers not practicing. Marquise Brown's not out there. Miles Boykin's not out there. Sammy Watkins is not out there. Bateman's not out there. And then, Deon Cain, who, with all these injuries, he would be getting a good shot now, but he hasn't been able to practice. So, the good news is Boykin, Brown, and Cain have been working on an adjacent field, really working hard. I mean, Marquise Brown's looked great to me for the last week, and this guy busts his butt. And his workouts he does with medicine balls and sprints, he looks good. He does. But I don't blame them. I mean, they say about hamstring, if you think he's ready, wait another week after that, and then he's ready. You know what I mean? They can't afford to get a setback from him. So it's been tough. It's been tough with that group to see the chemistry and just to see what they're going to have. I think with those guys not practicing, there's a good chance they're going to be practicing this week without any of them and not playing Saturday. And that's a lot of receivers to be out, which calls into question, do you even play your starting quarterback in that situation? So we'll see, guys like Jalen Moore are getting first team reps, and good for Jalen Moore. He's had a heck of a camp. I think they could do a lot worse than keeping him on the practice squad. I think he can play and could contribute at some point this year. Obviously, you don't envision him starting on the, day one. I like what Proche has done. Such a tough kid. But the next step is seeing it in the games. And I'm not saying it was his fault necessarily, but with all the momentum he built up in practice, the game comes and it kind of was an afterthought. You need to see it there. Duvernay, I think you're right. Good call on him. He is running better routes. And in the opportunity, getting all these reps and first team reps and kind of getting targeted and getting all this time with Lamar Jackson, I think you've seen him make some progress. I think this will be good for him in the long run, and good for Lamar to get to trust him. So, the guy I want to see more of, and I'm not, I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but it's just Tylan Wallace is just not really, it's he'll make a catch or two every practice, no day. He's not invisible. He's out there. He's working hard, getting better. You just haven't seen any plays that or routes, or you just haven't seen him do anything where you're like, okay, yeah, that gets my attention. And I think he kind of needs that, Cole, to get the momentum going. You know what I mean? I'm sure he would have liked to make a bigger impact. That one catch he almost made on the sidelines with 2 feet,
I was just about to bring that up. I was like, if he brings that in, how different is that conversation?
Exactly. I just think he needs some good things to happen to him.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important and I mean, you nailed the big thing for me, and it goes for the offensive, it goes for the whole offense, and it's that chemistry. And when we look back at last year with, basically literally no preseason, a very limited off season with the COVID season, the Ravens offense struggled for the first 6 to 8 weeks out the gates. And that's what I think concerns me. And that's what has my concern level high. We're not in the same atmosphere in terms of there's no games, there's, COVID restricted. We're not really in that exact same atmosphere, but guys aren't practicing, no one's out there getting that experience together. And that has to have you concerned. Even looking at Marquise Brown, who, you and I are on the same page. I'm a big Marquise Brown guy. I think he's gonna make a major impact. But go back to, the first 6 weeks, how many times did Lamar miss Brown deep because they just didn't have that kind of rapport? Yeah. So, it's great that he's getting back to the field, but, live game reps are a lot different than practice reps. And I think that's what concerns me is, they're not going to get that feel together, and that deep ball, if they can make that work, the things that does to the defensive backfield, the way the defense plays this offense with, safeties up in the box, and then you're hitting them over the top. It is such an important feature. So that, I think, is what gets me the most concerned. It's not really, I think everyone's going to be relatively healthy week 1. I think we know that, but how bad is that, or how limited is that chemistry going to be when things get rolling?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, that's a new look group, and let's be honest, it's great that it's great that Lamar Jackson got together with Sammy Watkins for a couple days in Phoenix, but that was a long time ago, and they really haven't. Now that Watkins, the good news is Watkins, I don't think is serious, and with him, you don't take any chances. I mean, with other receivers,
bubble wrap them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it is. I think it definitely is a concern. People want to see, well, does the new look passing game look different, or is Lamar throwing outside the numbers more? And it's just like none of his receivers are out here really, Cole. So it's tough to really measure. He's throwing at guys that probably aren't going to even be on the roster on September 13th. So yeah, it's not ideal. I think they're really going to have to lean early on their strengths. And things can come together quickly. I think we all remember week 1 2 years ago. No one saw that coming in Miami or wherever, South Florida, where I don't think it's Miami technically, but no one saw that coming against the Dolphins. It's just like, I think everybody had some concerns about their offense. And then all of a sudden it was just like, wow, look at this. So, we'll see. It can come together quickly. I will say this, and two things real quick. One, there's so much gloom and doom about the injuries around here. It's fire everybody. The trainer stinks. Get Steve Saunders out of here. Get Ron Medlin out of here. Tell Harbaugh to stop running his college boot camp. But, and I'll knock on wood when I say this, they haven't really, I think Bateman's highly unlikely. They have not ruled anyone out for week 1 yet. If Marquise Brown is back with a week left in camp and then has those 2 weeks, sign me up. You know what I mean? That's not a big issue. Sign me up for that. That's 3 weeks before the season opener. Not the best case scenario, but it's far better scenario than having him get hurt and be out 6 to 8 weeks where you might see him after the bye. So I think that's good news that these guys are working their way back. Now, you don't want to see setbacks, and that's important. The other thing is, I think Lamar's throwing a pretty nice ball. I really do. And this isn't a criticism of him, and I always have to be careful what I say because stuff on Lamar tends to be, taken out of context a little bit, or just the people who love Lamar, take the littlest bit of not even criticism, blow it out of proportion, and then the opposite, it's vice versa, both camps, he's so polarizing. But there's been far fewer like ducks. You know what I mean? Like he'd throw some deep balls where it just didn't come out of his hand right, and everyone knows what a duck is. He's thrown with nice zip on the ball. He has. I mean, accuracy's been probably improved. There's been some days where it hasn't been tip top, but it's been good enough. It's been improved, and he looks much better than he did. I didn't voice this too much because again, you alarm the pro Lamar crowd, but I don't think he looked all that good. I think he was very kind of some good, some bad in the OTAs and the mandatory minicamp. I don't really know what he did. He's touched it. He's touched on it a little bit, like working with Tom House's people a little bit during this break. But his mechanics look pretty good right now, and he's throwing with some zip. I look forward to seeing what he can do with a legitimate NFL receiving group.
Well, there we go. Let's inject a little positivity into the conversation,
come on,
right? There we go. And then let's move into, someone else that has stood out to me, and that's, he's got I don't know why I doubted him. Running back guru Matt Waldman brought him, highly recommended. It's Tyson Williams. He looked phenomenal, like a completely different running back than like Justice Hill did on Saturday. So is that been consistent in camp, like day in, day out? Because I just couldn't get over how explosive he was in and out of his cuts.
Yeah, he runs hard.
Hard.
He looks like a Greg Roman running back. It's so hard to tell. They don't do a ton of live running drills with tackling where you really get a feel. So it's really been hard to tell on him. But he was coming off an injury when they added him last year, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, he participated in that open practice at M&T Bank Stadium last year, the one where Matabike got hurt, and he was really impressive. I think he's had a nice summer. He runs hard. I think he, at very least, is a practice squad guy. I'd ask two things. One, can he pass protect on third down? Because Justice Hill is capable of doing that. He's experienced doing that. Two, I think we're seeing a lot, Cole, we've already saw it this week, and I think we're going to see it more. It's hard for them. It's going to be hard for them to keep guys on special teams only guys. So that means players who have a role and also play special teams probably have a leg up, Like, I honestly, Devontae Harris did not look very good the last couple of weeks. He was really struggling in one-on-ones. I mean, you really can't measure. They don't go live special team stuff, so you really can't measure how he's doing on special teams. But I thought he was on a bubble just because he was probably their most accomplished gunner.
Right.
Like, I think last year he was measured with some of the top 5 times down the field as a gunner. I thought that gave him a legitimate shot to make the team. And then you go into some other guys, Levine, who I think is in I think he's in pretty good shape. Jordan Richards, I don't think is in good shape at all. So they're going to lose some of these guys. And a guy like Justice Hill has become a pretty solid special teams player. They trust him. He can gun. He did gunning last year. And they've already lost some guys that you thought might enter that mix. Alak is a good special teams player. I think he's done. It wouldn't surprise me if he's on season-ending IR. I think you saw, Harris is already gone. So that kind of leads me to question whether, special teams always gets considered in Baltimore, but I do think that gives Justice Hill a solid advantage on Tyson Williams. But here we go, and Justice Hill's not practicing this week after what happened Saturday night. I don't even know what his injury is. I haven't asked. But I'll say this. He needs to get back on the field and make some plays when he's ready to, because I didn't consider him a stone cold lock. I had him in the category right below likely, but not lock. I'm not ready to completely drop him from that category. But as I said, with how Tyson Williams has played, how hard he runs, it would not surprise me if there's some consideration going now where I thought that third running back was locked, and I don't think it's kind of a lock anymore.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I mean, special teams is, no one likes to talk about it. No one seems to enjoy it unless you're Mikey Crawford, my partner. But he loves him some special teams. But it's part of the game. It's literally 1/3 of the units you're putting on the field, and you don't care about it until it bites you in the ass, really.
Yeah,
I mean, So
and you're gonna get. You have a new long snapper. That's a big adjustment. So you start subtracting some of the veterans from that group, and there's some guys you don't want to play on special teams. Like, you don't want Patrick Queen to be out there covering punts. You know what I mean? If you can avoid it because the injury factor, you don't want some of their top DBs out there. So, there's going to be a couple veterans that make the team because of special teams. We see it every year under John Harbaugh. I don't think, however, they're in a position where they can afford to keep as many, special teams only guys as they have in the past. They need those spots to keep some young players.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And then let's jump into the defense, where I think there's been a little bit less doom and gloom, a lot more excitement, especially after what they have 5 takeaways on Saturday. It was absurd. And I want to start with 2 guys that, I mean, we're always talking about, how tough it can be to adjust to the NFL for a rookie. And then, it's that sophomore season where you really want to see guys jump. And it's those guys that I think take that big jump in year 2 that, that's where that ceiling grows, right? Where it's like, okay, we might have some real potential here. And, what other 2 guys than Malik Harrison and Patrick Queen that have seemed to take a massive step, at least in Saturday's performance. Queen's obviously had a lot of buzz around him. He took a lot of flack in his rookie year. But he also had a lot of responsibility, and now it's looking like the game's slowing down a little bit for him. He read that screen out. I don't want to overreact over one play, but that's the type of read, react, sideline to sideline speed that you wanted from a player like him. And then Malik Harrison's just an absolute hammer. I don't know how you block that guy. It was beyond impressive. So, is this a regular occurrence in camp, and should my expectations be tempered going into the regular season?
I really like what I've seen from Malik Harrison, the last 10 days or so. I mean, they talk about a thumper, when he gets downhill, man, he brings it. And, they've always kind of had that player, as a linebacker. I'm not making any comparisons. I'm just saying it's been fun to watch when the pads have gone on. It's early in camp. Everyone's like, well, I get probably 25 questions a day. How does so-and-so look? And I got some with Malik Harrison, and it's just like, okay. It's like camp doesn't start for Malik Harrison until you put the pads on. He's not in coverage drills. You know what I mean? It's not his game. If you ask him to cover, it's not what you're looking for. But you put the pads on and you do live running drills, and that's where you start seeing the thumping going on. And I really like what I've seen from him. He's playing with a little more confidence. The thing with Queen is you just see him out there, man. He's playing. He's not reacting. The wheels aren't spinning. As I said, Rob Ryan will have those two guys thinking they're the best inside linebacker pair in the league because that's the swagger he has. That's how he coaches. I think Mike McDonald is a good young coach, and let's hope he does great at Michigan. But Rob Ryan's a different personality. It's just nonstop going and cajoling and complimenting and having fun with those guys. And he's got those guys playing with swagger. And I love how Patrick Queen is playing. Now, the one thing that would worry me a little bit about Patrick Queen, and Wink, kind of said it today, which was pretty surprising. He talked about he needs to be like that and have the energy to do that more consistently. We heard Patrick Queen, I think, after Saturday's game, say at one point he was too tired to do something. And we heard Patrick Queen in the OTAs or whatever, his offseason interview, criticize himself for the shape he was in. So he sort of has brought it up a couple times. He doesn't look out of shape at all. He looks good, but he's going to have to be able to be more consistent and keep that energy level up all the time, and not just when he smells an opportunity to make a big play. I thought the criticism last year was completely unfair of Patrick Queen. Was it great all the time? No. Did he have some issues? Absolutely. I mean, he's not the only rookie middle linebacker that Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy have made look silly. He's not the only rookie linebacker that's been exploited by Bill Belichick and how they do it. It's a glamorous position in Baltimore. There's a lot of pressure on him last year, no regular offseason. I'm interested to see what he does. I saw enough last year to be excited about him, not to be down on him. And I've seen enough over the last 3 weeks to believe he's headed down the right path.
There it is. That's what I need to hear. That's all I need to hear.
More positivity.
There we go. I love it. And then, one guy that stood out to me, and I don't know how much it's getting covered. I don't know if it's as marquee of a battle as I seem to think it is, but one guy that stood out to me in all the right ways was Aaron Crawford, fighting for that kind of interior defensive line spot. You and I have talked. I'm not a big Justin Ellis guy. Yeah. I think he's he's a warm body in the sense that he can get in there and literally play, but he's not really doing a heck of a whole lot. Whereas Crawford is kind of shown a little bit. So, what have you seen anything from him that kind of gets you a little excited? Is he pushing for that kind of Brandon Williams backup spot?
I think he's turned it around a little bit. I think there was some, I don't want to say concerns isn't the right word, because it's not like he's ever played poorly. I just think there was some hope that he'd come out of the blocks a little faster at training camp. And I'm sure Wink has challenged him. They like Aaron Crawford. I thought he played reasonably well in the Pittsburgh game last year when they had all the COVID issues. And he certainly held his own. It'll be interesting. I think it is a competition. I think Ellis probably has the lead at the moment, but I don't think that's a lock by any means. And, I think these will be 2 big weeks for Aaron Crawford. You know what I mean? And the Ravens, I don't know. Crawford's a guy that definitely clears. There's a lot of respect for how the Ravens coach interior defensive linemen. He's the type of big run stuffer. Now he's been on tape doing it a couple times. They'll have a couple more games. So, unfortunately, and he's been out the last couple days. Again, I don't know. These guys are just dry. It's hard to keep track. So we'll see if he's out in the field tomorrow. He's not probably a guy that can afford to miss any time and still have a chance to, to win a role. You know, he needs to be out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, another, spot that we're kind of turning heads was the play of the safeties. I thought Geno Stone looked really good.
Yeah.
I thought Ar'Darius Washington looked good. I thought even Brandon Stevens looked good. And I'm going to be completely honest. I like Brandon Stevens. I like what he brings. I thought he'd be the kind of guy that would be that kind of third round pick whipping boy, just because I thought he was just, I think he was one of those upside potential picks. But, when he got out there, I was like, this guy, like, he's just a football player. Like, he's kind of, he finds space on the football field, and he's kind of in spots where you're just like, what the heck? I'm seeing Chris Westry kind of. So, like, is this DB group as deep as it looks? Because, as I'm not going to say I expected Devontae Harris to make the team because it's so deep. I thought they might have held on to him a little bit because of injury concerns, especially because of the special teams abilities, like what we talked about earlier. But, how good is this safety group? Like, is it as deep as it's looking in the first little start here?
Yeah, I want to see more. I want to see more. We've seen one preseason game, but there's certainly been some positive signs. And we know what Chuck Clark is. Desean Elliot has been the most underrated positive story in training camp. And I haven't talked about him enough. I'm not criticizing my fellow beat writers, but I don't think he's gotten enough. He looks really good. He's moving really well. I mean, he even admitted it. There's things he couldn't do athletically last year. He feels more like an athlete. That's not a guy who's work is a problem. I mean, he's going to put in the work. It's can he physically do it? We've seen some good signs there. But I think the depth there is way better than I thought it would be. And we haven't even talked about Jimmy Smith, who I think would move into a safety and third down type situation. So, yeah, they're starting to develop some options. And that's what I mean earlier, that, how do you justify keeping a special teams only guy who doesn't really make a ton of plays in special teams over one of these young kids? Geno Smith, I always say Geno Smith, Geno Stone. I don't know why I ever want to talk about Geno Smith. But Geno Stone just looks in much better shape. You could tell early last year, and he was always getting yelled at by the coaches. He's playing with a lot more confidence. He's moving around a lot better. I love Ar'Darius Washington. He's just a football player. I could see the concerns about him. There's times where you clearly see where his size hurts him. How do they use him? How can they get the best out of him? I don't know. I mean, I think people assume he's on the team. I still think he's probably on the other side of the bubble with 2 weeks to change that. But they have the option now of, I think Geno Stone needs to be on this team because he's a legitimate experienced safety. Jimmy Smith is not. Brandon Stevens is not. I think Geno Smith gives them a legitimate safety at the position. And that's not to belittle what Brandon Stevens is right now because, that pick was criticized, and I was like, like when they made it. And then, you talk to different people, and people around the league were like him, and they're like, oh, of course the Ravens get a player like that, and I'm working on a story about him too. And I talked to him, and he's such a quiet kid, and they're trying to get that out of him. As you play that position, you need to be a little more vocal and communicative. So I think he's learning, but he handles himself like a rookie should. He just goes about his business. Gets his work done, is always asking other veterans when he's not in the play. He's always, asking them what they saw and just he's always working, always doing something. And he was so active, he made a play on special teams too, Brandon Stevens. And, I remarked at one time, the Ravens think Brandon Smith is going to help them immediately. And someone said, of course he is. He's a third-round pick. But no, that's not the case. I mean, we've seen them draft a ton of players. There's a ton of guys that get drafted in the third round that aren't immediate help. And we've seen guys they draft in the second round that aren't immediate help. So, he's further ahead than I think most people thought. And that's why I made that comment, because everyone looked at it like a developmental project because he has only 2 years of experience playing. I mean, I talked to him, Cole. He didn't even play DB in high school. Not even in a sanctioned high school game. Now, he said he did it in one of the 7-on-7 off-season leagues. But this is an incredible story, 2 years at the position. he gave up a scholarship to go to a place where there was no guarantees he was going to get a scholarship. That's how bad he wanted to play DB. And now he's in the NFL. And I think that's awesome. He's banged up now too. And you just hate to see all these rookies losing reps. Yeah. But I think what you saw last Saturday against the Saints is very positive. The athleticism, the aggressiveness. More often than not, he was in the right place at the right time. He has a lot of learning to do, but he also has some tools that'll allow him to play through that stuff and help them immediately.
Yeah, and I think he's a good example of one of those guys where we're talking about, it kind of Steven's ability to kind of be a backup safety and also play special teams well is going to put guys like the Jordan Richardsons of the world into the outside of the bubble because, they don't have to rely on special team specific guys to give them those special teams reps. They're going to get it from these younger guys that also bring other positional flexibility. So I think that's a perfect example and definitely something that stood out to me. And then, how is it looking now with Justin Houston out there? I've read a lot about, him kind of working with Owe, working with him on some of his pass rush moves. I was shocked from Owe, the amount of times that he dropped in coverage wasn't something I was expecting. So, obviously it's a Wink Martindale offense or defense. Yeah. Why was I surprised by that? But I just thought, I think I got stuck, and I think the fan base was stuck in thinking that because he had raw athleticism that Owe was this kind of like low floor, high ceiling guy. But then when you get into his tape, you're like, okay, wait, he sets a mean edge. He plays physical. He's athletic as all hell. And, he's showing this ability to drop. It's kind of like every time I watch more of him, and this was right after the draft, I was like, okay, that floor is now climbing. It's climbing because, he can do some very critical things really well. So, I was surprised by that. Is that what we're seeing kind of consistently in camp? Him doing that kind of stuff, or
yeah, I will say this: he slowed down a little bit over the last week. I mean, there were like the second week at camp, it was like every day where he was making 2 or 3 plays, and you were like, "This lights turned on for this kid." I mean, this is amazing. Like he was one of the best players in practice for a full, week, 7 to 10 days. Got banged up with his knee, and I think it slowed him down a little bit. And I don't want to say he's hit a wall because he looked plenty. Saturday night, he looked like he was ready to play. Maybe he hasn't been as noticeable and explosive as we saw a little bit earlier, but they are very excited about him. There's good reason to be. You look at that outside linebacker mix and you start to you feel for something we talked about all off season, and you start to you feel better about the mix of players and their skill sets, and you have a little bit of everything covered, and then you have the guys who can move inside, and you have Bowser in coverage, and you have kind of the old wily accomplished pass rusher Justin Houston, and each practice he seems to get a little bit more comfortable, take on a little more reps, and I think they've been happy with how he's fit in from a personality standpoint. You see, I've seen him after practice 2 or 3 times now working with somebody, and it's Tyus Bowser is always looking for pass rush stuff, and Bowser's he's like that. He gets after it, and he's not satisfied just because he's got his contract. So I like that group. I really do, and I think Owe is going to be so much fun to watch just develop. Over the course of the year, I'm sure there will be moments where he'll go quiet for like 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll all say he hit the rookie wall. But that's the process. That's part of the process. And man, you listen to him interviewed. He's just no nonsense. I say he's a mean dude, but I say that in a good way. He's mean on the field, and he's no nonsense in everything. He just takes it very seriously. I feel so much better about his potential now than I did when they drafted him. I really do, because you see it firsthand. You see, and Wink said something that I thought was really good. He's like, these veterans are flocking to give him advice. They wouldn't do that if they thought this guy didn't have it, like it's, they'd help another guy. We saw Calais Campbell working with Aaron Adoye before. So, and that's nothing against Aaron Adoye, but he's not a first round pick. So yeah, they're always willing to help. But the amount of people you see kind of saddling up to him or talking to him after a drill, they really think he's going to be special, and it'll be interesting to see his development going forward. I mean, Wink's got to be just loving the ways he can use him, and I'm sure they'll show him in different looks just because he wants to get other teams thinking about him.
Yeah, and I think at the top of my list of most terrifying things I could picture on a football field is him coming down the field as a gunner. Like that was getting all the love from Mike's tweet today, and I was like it's just he's absurdly fast for how big he is and wide as a door. Like it was terrifying. But
I know, and it's just we've seen him do special teams drills in practice. He's always out there doing them. Now, he did the gunner thing a little bit earlier. I haven't seen that extensively. Obviously, in the game we saw it. But just other drills they do, he just looks so fluid doing them. The change of direction and the sprinting downfield and getting ready. He's impressive. He's a very impressive athlete.
Yeah, and it's exciting because, they like to put multiple edge players on the field at the same time. And now with Owe showing, like I said, he's a rookie. They're not going to ask him to do a whole lot. But, if they can get him in there, Houston on one side, him on one side. You got Bowser out there that can also blitz and drop into coverage. With the way Wink likes to set these guys up and have 3 to 4 3 to 4 edge players on the field, just with their ability to move them all around, it just makes what you can show the offense. And, from the offensive line perspective, it's hell because you don't know where the pressure's coming from. And so the more guys that can drop into coverage just benefits. So that was probably the one thing where I saw that and I was like, all right, this is what gets me excited. It's I thought he could kind of step in and do quite a bit. And obviously Houston helps. I think Houston helps Owe as much as Owe helps Houston in the sense that, Houston might not be asked to play, 75% snaps, and that can keep him a little bit fresher, like we've seen with Pernell McPhee last year, where, when they did need to lean on him in the Tennessee game, they could because they had other guys taking those snaps from him earlier in the year to keep him a little bit fresher, a little bit healthier going throughout the season. So I think it was funny because I was rewatching the conversation you and I had back before training camp, and I was kind of like, what's the area where didn't get enough attention, and we talked about the edge position, and it's amazing how adding Houston, getting some of these flashes from Owe, Dalen Hayes looking a little bit more advanced than a 5th round pick. Like you go from it being like, okay, it's a little concerning to like, okay, we got a little bit of depth here now. That's exciting.
And I think every year before camp we do these roster projections and we're like, I don't know how they can keep this many guys. There's too many good players. And now here you have it. They're 2 weeks away from having to get down to 53. Basically the number 3 quarterback, if they're considering it, I doubt it anymore. Trace McSorley getting injured. You've seen some other bubble guys either go on IR already or get cut. You've seen certain people not even make bubble guys not even really mount any serious push to make the team. And it comes into focus to where you say, okay, right now, if I had to do a roster projection, I could probably get it down to 55 without thinking even twice. And then those final 2 spots will obviously be difficult. And, stuff changes over these couple weeks. And they have some guys dealing with injuries. So we'll have to see. But the outside linebacker, what do they do with Jalen Ferguson? I think is interesting. He's one of the most interesting questions now in terms of roster decisions that they have. And I think the other one, and we touch on this a little bit, is what they do at DB. Do they find a spot for Chris Westry, and do they find a spot for Geno Stone or Darius Washington? Those are the ones that really interest me more. Than some of these other, Alaka's not going to be on the team. I thought he had a chance, and Amon Marshall, maybe if he had a healthy camp, had a chance. And, I thought Devontae Harris had a good shot because of his, gunner experience. So those are all by the wayside now, but those other guys we talked about, I think people just think Ferguson's a goner and the history here tells me he's not. Now, I'm not saying he's on the team, But Wink loves him, first of all. Wink wants to be right about Jalen Ferguson. Second of all, Eric DaCosta does not like cutting draft picks. And that draft class is hurting right now. And he does not like the criticism about a draft class not panning out. Now, Marquise Brown, okay, he's been a solid player, but then you go into Boykin and Ferguson and McSorley and Amon Marshall and Dalen Mack, and it's just like that's not a very good draft class. I think they want to give Jalen Ferguson every chance to stick. I think the best case scenario is Jalen Ferguson going nuts these next 2 weeks against second and third team tackles and having a team maybe willing to flip a fifth or sixth for him, and you feel like you got something for him. He's just, I don't know. I have a hard time believing at this point that they're going to cut him. So we'll see, but that's an interesting spot. That really is. I think that's interesting to watch. And as I said, the safety competition, it's going to come into focus here these next couple of weeks. And, there's going to be a player or two that they would prefer to keep that unfortunately they're just not going to have room for. Yeah,
absolutely. And I got to say, it's kind of funny how you were like, we were talking about how long this was going to go. I said 30 minutes. We're at 50 minutes now.
Yeah.
This is what me and you get together. We just, can talk for days. So,
yeah.
I think we basically got to go top to bottom on the roster. It's exactly what we were trying to get out of you because, it's great to kind of sit back and kind of, take a top level look at the team. I think it's been great to kind of, get a few weeks of practicing, get these guys actually on the field and then do a check-in. So let's end on one final question. Who is the guy that in the next 2 weeks, and maybe it's Ferguson, you just answered it, but who's the guy you want to see the most out of in the next 2 weeks?
Ferguson would be a candidate. You know what? I think this guy is I don't want to say lock, but I think he's pretty close to it. But I want to see James Proche is if you saw this kid at practice, he's constantly doing something, and he's charismatic as all heck, and he works his butt off. I mean, getting up at 4:30, 5:30 in the morning every day this offseason. I think he wants it. I don't think he's saying this publicly, but I think he was sick of hearing about all the receivers they brought in and the fact that he didn't even get a chance to play last year pretty much. I want to see this translate to these open practices. Okay, we know he can beat up on Nigel Warrior and Khalil Dorsey and we've seen it all camp. And once he started going against the frontline guys, we didn't see as much. And that's part of it. That's part of it for a young receiver. I want to see him do it against another team. I want to see him play with Lamar Jackson in preseason games and get some chemistry, or a preseason game and get some chemistry going there. I think he can not only make the team, I think he can help them this year. But, we've all, and I'm not saying he's this guy, but at some point it's got to go beyond the practice field and translate to games. And he's still young. I think it'll happen, but I would love to see it over the next couple weeks. He's an easy guy to root for. He's been through a lot. Had a kidney issue when he was in high school that almost shut down his football career. Wants it badly. I think he's a guy the next couple weeks where you want to see stand out in the games, and earn his spot on the team, or I should say solidify his spot on the team.
Yeah, and so he was in my honorable mention because I'm going with an offensive lineman from home. But I have a guy on my Twitter account that he's not even a Ravens fan. He's an SMU fan, and he's I ended up following. We ended up exchanging follows after they drafted Proche, and he sent me a DM way back after they drafted him on day 3, and he was like, "Listen, I get that I'm an SMU fan. I probably look biased." He said, "You're just going to love this kid." He meant so much to that SMU program when he was there. And, you're bang on. It's a guy that you want to see do well. And it's the difference between, the Jeremy Butlers in the world is the guys that go out there and get it done in games. And, I think every year. And, there were, I'd like to see Tyler Huntley kind of run the first team offense if Lamar's not out there. I thought, he looked a little bit different than Trace. And, especially Trace kept taking some of those 12-step drops and it kind of got, as much as the offensive line wasn't helping, if you're going to take a 12-step drop, you got to step up in the pocket if your guys are only setting with 3 kick steps. That kind of stuff was killing me to watch, because I thought we could have seen a little bit more downfield opportunities with the receivers, and that might help a guy like Proche. But here's the hoping we get to see a little bit more out of him in a game. And then for mine, I got to go with Tyree Phillips, because, and it's not Tyree Phillips at tackle, it's Tyree Phillips at guard. I'm really hoping, I tweeted about it today. I think he's playing left tackle mostly out of necessity, given that Stanley's out. They just don't have kind of a guy to step in there and play left tackle. They're not going to probably put McCurry out there, especially because they don't have a right guard, and he's kind of playing right guard. So, we talked about this too. It's kind of like, I think in an ideal world, you have Phillips as more of a guard, but the lack of draft capital spent at offensive tackle has just kind of pushed him outside. But I'd really like to see him get kind of first team reps with that at that left guard spot. See him beside Bozeman, see if it helps out. So that's the guy that I want to see the most out of in the next 2 weeks, especially if Cleveland is a little bit banged up or not getting his full reign. We need someone to jump up and grab that left guard job. So, I think if they get into week 1, everyone's healthy, everyone's back, and Phillips can kind of take a couple steps, I might feel, not great, not top 5, top 10 type, but, middle of the league type of offensive line performance. And I think we can live with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I wouldn't have said this 2-3 weeks ago, but I'm kind of coming around to the fact that how this offseason or how this training camp has went, I'm kind of coming around to the fact he may be their best option at left guard. And we're seeing him do it a lot more. I still think they're going to have to trade for a tackle. I mean, I agree. It struggled there. I don't think Patrick McCarry's the answer there. I think we've seen that. I mean, I like Patrick McCarry. I think he's tough as heck, and he's a valuable player, but that's asking an awful lot for him to do that. And I wonder, could you swap maybe one of your guards for a tackle, or could you swap a guard and maybe a 5th or 6th round pick for a tackle? Because the way I look at the offensive line picture is, I think there's probably 7 definites, Stanley, Cleveland, Bozeman, Zeitler, Villanueva, Tyree Phillips, and Patrick McCarry, right? Those are the 7 definites. And then you got 4 or 5 guys for maybe 2 spots. I think they'll probably keep 9. 10 seems to be overkill to me with their other roster. 8 seems to be a little light, because I think, it's tough to get offensive linemen through waivers. So if you're even if you want a guy, you have to find room for him. So I'll say 9. So for those 2 spots, you look at Bredesen, Ben Powers, Tristan Castillo, I think are the 3 that sort of stand out. I can't see a world where Andre Smith is on this team. And
I was gonna say those two of the 3 guys you just listed, none of them play tackle. Like it's just killing me, man.
That's the thing. So
me.
if you might be able to get, you might be able to kind of get some, or even if it doesn't even have to be trading one of them for tackle, but if you could trade one of them for a day 3 pick and then use a day 3 pick to go out and get a tackle, I think that would be the best case scenario. But I think we all have to measure expectations. Like NFL quality tackles are just not out on the street right now. People mentioned Russell Okung. You talk to people in Carolina about Russell Okung, and there's a reason why he's available right now. And you can say that about a lot of guys. I know you're doing your Marcus Peters on Justin Houston and trying to recruit Mitchell Schwartz here, which is a game effort. So, maybe one of these guys that gets healthy and is ready to play. I like the idea of giving Rick Wagner a call and saying, look, what about being a swing tackle in Baltimore? Now, the reports are when he got let go in Green Bay that he's kind of had it and he was looking to retire. He was at least considering it. I would make that call, and get paid a good, get paid $1 million or $2 million to be our swing tackle. Give him some time to ramp up. But, there's a couple guys out there that are at least intriguing. I doubt they're going to be able to, there's going to be one or two on the waiver wire that you probably would be okay with, acceptable. I mean, look, we remember that one year they got Tony Bergstrom, and I forgot. The kid from UVA, the center, Luke Polanco. Yeah. So the Ravens make those kind of moves late in camp in the past. So we'll see. I easily could see an offensive lineman on their 53-man on August 31st that's not currently on their roster.
Yeah, and I think you have to, because I if you go into the season with Phillips as a swing tackle, like you're an injury away again, and you need someone to get out there and be able to play the spot. And it's no disrespect to Phillips, because I think Phillips is a capable guard. I think he's got a ceiling there. But when I watch him play tackle, I want to hit my head against the wall, because it's just, it doesn't. And I seriously think he's that kind of guy where I think he's struggled with his processing. He's kind of struggled with his play speed. And I think moving him around, specifically a player like him that has those deficiencies, moving him around is only going to make it worse at the position he ends up at, because, he seems like he needs to get into a rhythm and kind of stay in one spot, and maybe he can, put something together there. So, let's see.
Yeah, I mean, to maximize this guy's ability, he has to play there. The yo-yo, and I understand why they're doing it. Look at the situation they're in with all their injuries and trying to make that puzzle, try to find the best 8-9 guys. But putting them in one position and just letting them go to work. You know what? I think what I have my, and I know I'm not getting into Ben Powers bashing. I think he's looked good at times. He's fine. It's not like I'm disappointed in him necessarily, but it just was eyebrow raising to me that Ben Cleveland, who's the presumed favorite for the left guard job, last week, he, gets a concussion. I think it was like a Wednesday or Thursday practice. I forgot what day it was. Misses a couple practices, didn't play the game. Okay. Yeah. So Ben Powers is the other guy that's heavily in the mix, and they decide that's the week to put Ben Powers at tackle in practice, and then they play him some at tackle in the game. If you were confident that he was your guy at left guard, and he's a more, he's not really a swing tackle candidate, I don't think, then you would think that would have been the week to just load him up with reps, have him play with the first and the second team, have him run out and play a quarter and a half to full half at left guard, give him every opportunity to win that job. And yet they moved him around. Guys that move around like that, those are reserves who they're trying to increase their versatility. So I'm just skeptical how much they view him as being in that picture just by their actions there, and you could say, and I get it, because it holds true with Tyree Phillips a little too. You could say, well, they were desperate. You need somebody to protect your quarterback's blind side. But I don't know. That didn't seem right to me all of a sudden to try when the competition is supposedly heating up and the guy you're competing with, one of the guys is all of a sudden out and you're moved to another position that week. That was odd to me. The whole thing was.
And the other thing that didn't make sense is they didn't they did have an option there, and it was Michael Schofield who ended up in there after. And that's not even like, I think Adrian Ely only played 4 snaps before the kneels. So it's kind of like, they had some guys that could step in and play specifically right tackle. Left tackle is a little bit different. And I think that's true on any team. It's just a different position. It's harder to play. There's less guys that can play it. It's what maybe gives Foster Sorrell, if he can kind of keep stacking games where he can play a little well, no, he's probably not going to be the answer, but you know what I mean? Like maybe he's a bigger candidate for the practice squad than a guy like Ely who looks like a right tackle. So, it was strange. And, I was at my brother's wedding on Saturday and I got a text from Mike and he's like, Ben Powers playing right tackle. And I was like, I got to go in the bathroom and start streaming this on my phone.
Yeah, that's where we saw it. And we're not allowed to say who's taking reps where in practice. Right. But when he played there at right tackle, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out. They wouldn't have just put him out there for the first time. He obviously had been doing this in recent practices, and we saw that. And I was kind of like, when Ben Cleveland's out? This is my speculation 100%. But I wonder if they're hiding Ely a little bit. He's from a prestigious program that just pumps out offensive linemen. They don't really think he's ready to be their swingman, but they also want to keep him. And what's the best way to keep him? You hide him. You don't allow him to put much on tape. and you hopefully to get him, because every team in the league is looking for young developmental linemen. But I don't know. That's just my speculation. I think he's looked okay. I mean, he looks like a guy that needs some work, but he's also not looked overwhelmed. So we'll see. I mean, it's sure, I think they're not saying this publicly, but I do think they would have liked to have somebody, a couple of those guys, really jump up. And now all of a sudden everyone's calling for Bozeman to move back to guard and just find a center. That's just tough to do at this point. You know what I mean? And I think people are enamored with Tristan Colon just based on how he played serviceably or pretty solid in 2 regular season games. I think he struggled a little bit the other night, but PFF gave him the highest grade, I was told, or something, or they showed him with no pressures, and everyone's, kind of pumping that again. I don't know. I mean, I think he's a good young lineman to keep around. And in fact, I wouldn't surprise me if he gets that 9th spot. I would have to think, it's between him, Bredesen, and Powers for those 2. So we shall see. It's going to be a fun couple of weeks, though. I'm looking forward to see how it plays out. And but we're talking about all these guys, and I think everybody in the Ravens world felt better seeing Stanley and Zeitler out on the field. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Let's hope that we don't even have to worry about this down the road, and it's kind of more 2019-esque where we have some good health. And, we started with offensive line. We ended with offensive line. I think that's the 2 guys watching football way where we're focused on that. So, Jay-Z, thank you so much for joining me, especially coming to us live from the beautiful hotel down in Carolina you've never heard of. And, for everyone out there, I don't even need to say this. All of Jay-Z's work can be found on The Athletic. I've not hidden my endorsement for a subscription to their work. I love it. I use it for not just my Ravens stuff. I love my Ottawa Senators writer. I love my Blue Jays writer. It's incredible the work's coming out there. So I'll drop a link in the description below to the subscription page. Get on there, get a subscription. They're usually very cheap, and it's the best, cup of coffee you're going to spend a month. So thanks again so much, Jay-Z, and I wish you nothing but the best down there in Carolina. Safe travels coming home.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Cole. Always enjoy it, and let's do it again soon.
Sounds good, brother. All right. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.